Trent Bradshaw with Bradshaw Financial Planning, and thank you for joining us for Mind Your Money. Today is December the 7th, 2020. Thank you for joining us for this market update. Want to jump in, really touch on a few items as far as the agenda is concerned. First, we're going to look at the S&P 500. We're going to look at the returns that have occurred over the last 4 months or so, plus the volatility, obviously, that's come back into the market. Second thing, we're going to look at M1 money supply. And a lot of people are like, well, what's M1 money supply? We'll talk a little bit about that, bring you up to speed on what we're seeing there as far as the amount of money that's moving around in the system. Third, we're going to talk about inflation. Is there evidence? Well, we'll show you the proof. Fourth, let's talk about Secure Act 2.0. Obviously, we had Secure Act this year because of COVID-19. Well, potentially, we've got bipartisan support with Congress in regards to initiating potentially a second version of that. Okay, let's jump right in. The first chart we're going to look at is the S&P 500 over the last 4 months. Obviously, you can see from the chart that we've had a lot of volatility that's come back in to the market itself. Obviously, in September, October, the market was very, very tough. Market rebounded here in November after we got through the election. There was what I would call a little bit of clarity on where things stand. Obviously, that could still, change going into the January timeframe with the elections down in Georgia again on the Senate side of the equation. But, right now it does remain to look like we've got gridlock in Congress, which the market does like that. The losses that were experienced in September and October, which historically are tough months for the market anyway, have been erased by what occurred in November. So that's a positive. The market's actually broken out to new highs. We do foresee that being a positive going into 2021. So we'll keep an eye on it and obviously be back with some updates there. Secondly, let's jump back into the M1 money supply. We've always talked about liquidity and making sure that there was money moving around in the system. Well, the M1 money supply is really looking at checking accounts, physical currency that is out there in the system. Surprisingly, during the last week in November, from the 16th to roughly around the 24th, so we're talking about a week's worth of time, we saw the M1 money supply go up by $500 billion, which is a little surprising. But that tells us that Congress and the Fed is starting to pump money back into the system again.
Fair to say you simply flooded the system with money?
Yes, we did. That's another way to think about it. We did.
Where does it come from? Do you just print it?
We print it digitally. So we as a central bank, we have the ability to create money digitally, and we do that by buying treasury bills or bonds or other government guaranteed securities, and that actually increases the money supply. We also print actual currency, and we distribute that through the Federal Reserve banks.
Now, in addition to that, we're looking for stimulus. When stimulus comes back in, based on the latest deal, it could be around $900 billion to $1 trillion. That definitely will bring that liquidity back in, and correlation to the market obviously is on the upside. By looking at this chart, you can see when the money supply goes up, market goes up. There's a correlation there, and you can see it clearly. And if that changes, obviously we'll make adjustments. But right now the correlation is still there. It's been there for many years. So when that liquidity is flowing, we're definitely wanting to be in the market. We're going to put some weighting on that in our decision-making process. Third, does that create inflation? By pumping all this money into the system, additional stimulus, increasing the money supply, well, are we seeing evidence of that? Well, we'll look at this chart in regards to you looking at iron ore, looking at copper, other commodities that may be used in industrial production. Look at the overall cost and look at the spike of inflation we've seen during 2020. So as the money supply increases, eventually that leads to inflation. We are seeing that. So we're seeing cost of goods go up. We got to keep an eye on that because that could put some pressure on the market as we lead into 2021. But, obviously that's definitely a concern and we got to pay attention to it. The last part, I want to talk a little bit about the Secure Act. We called it the Secure Act 2.0. Well, what are some of the changes? Well, I'm going to grab my list here and touch on a few items. But what we've got, first of all, if we get the Secure Act 2.0 in place, which again, we do have bipartisan support from the Republican and Democratic side, but it creates incentives for small businesses to create retirement plans and go ahead and get those in place. They potentially can receive some tax credits by doing that if it's actually enacted. The next thing that it does with those retirement plans is also set up auto enrollment. So as employees join corporations, they're automatically enrolled into the plans. That will give them an opportunity to potentially build on their retirement right out of the gates. It also allows employees to utilize or not contribute to 401ks, pay down student loans, and actually get the corporate match by doing that too. So that's huge. You got new employees graduating from college that come out of there with large amounts of loans, and it's going to give them an opportunity to concentrate on paying those loans down, but yet not miss out on the corporate contribution from a match standpoint inside their 401k. That's a huge positive. The next thing is protecting investors from making mistakes in 401ks and withdrawals from 401ks and the penalties that are involved. We see this all the time. Folks will request distributions from the 401ks, not realizing they're going to face a 10% penalty, but ultimately that could be potentially there. But it looks like Congress is going to be potentially more flexible on letting them correct that and not be so stringent on those penalties. Give a little flexibility to those individuals that do make that mistake. The next one is allow for catch-up provisions, maybe larger catch-up provisions. Right now, if you're over age 50, you can add an additional $6,500 inside 401ks. You can also add an additional $1,000 into IRAs. Those may get larger with the Secure Act 2.0 if it's enacted. The last part is, well, actually the last two parts, RMDs, required minimum distribution age, right now has been bumped with the modifications from 70 and a half to 72 for 2020, but maybe that will be bumped based on what we're reading from 72 to 75. That means you can let your retirement funds grow for a longer period of time. That's a huge change. And then last, allow for flexibility for distributions out of IRAs in order to contribute to charities. This is probably my favorite piece of the change if it does occur. I think the private sector needs to be able to have the ability to support charities and those charitable organizations out there, and this change would be huge if it occurs. So there's some positive things on the horizon in regards to the Secure Act 2.0. Pay attention to it, may be beneficial, and we'll bring you those updates. This is Trent Bradshaw with Bradshaw Financial Planning and Mind Your Money. And I appreciate you joining us for this market update. Make sure you join us on social media. Also send us an email or give us a call if you got any questions. Have a wonderful week.